have heard of a land on a faraway strand. In the Bible the story is told, where cares never come, never darkness nor gloom, and nothing shall ever grow old. In that beautiful land on the faraway strand, no storms with their blast ever frown. The street, I am told, is paved with pure gold, and the sun it shall never go down.
So Exodus chapter 12, starting in verse 37. The sons of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I don't know if that's 600,000 males plus women and children, or if that's 600,000 people in total. Maybe as we read through this, we'll hear some things that make us go, oh, then that must be what that means. But anyway, at this point, I don't know there's enough in that verse to ascertain exactly what it means by that. Aside from children, we do know that it's talking about adults. And a mixed multitude also went up with them, along with flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. They baked the dough which they had brought out of Egypt into cakes of unleavened bread, for it had not become leavened since they were driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. Now, the time that the sons of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came about at the end of 430 years, to the very day, that all of the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. That's an interesting tidbit of information, that it was to the very day. I would argue that that probably is just simply letting us know that this was intentional, that the timeline was intentional. It was not accidental. It is a night to be observed for the Lord, for having brought them out from the land of Egypt. This night is for the Lord, to be observed by all the sons of Israel throughout their generations. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it. But every man's slave purchased with money after you have circumcised him, he may eat of it. A sojourner or a hired servant shall not eat of it. It is to be eaten in a single house. You are not to bring forth any of the flesh outside of the house, nor are you to break any bone of it." And that is clearly so that there is some messianic overtones. All the congregation of Israel are to celebrate this. But if a stranger sojourns with you and celebrates the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and let them come near to celebrate it, and he shall be like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it. The same law shall apply to the native as to the stranger who sojourns among you. Then all the sons of Israel did so. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And it came about on that same day that the Lord brought the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their host. Now, 500,000 plus people is a lot of people. 600,000 plus people, a lot of people. This was no small undertaking. It was no small thing. We've had maybe just a little more than that that's crossed over our borders since October of last year. I think we're getting close to 1 million at this point, maybe just a little over. But anyway, that's taken months. And it's still been in noticeable blocks of people. You noticed when hundreds of people come walking over at one time. That's a noticeable thing. When you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, this is quite a feat and quite impressive. And that's what's being expressed here is they just all got up and walked out. Exactly how long it took them all to get out, I'm not sure, but they did it that night. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Sanctify to me every firstborn, the first offspring of every womb among the sons of Israel, both of man and beast, belongs to me." And Moses said to the people, "Remember this day in which you went out from Egypt, from the houses of slavery, for by a powerful hand the Lord brought you out from this place. And nothing leavened shall be eaten. On this day in the month of Abib you are about to go forth. And it shall be when the Lord brings you to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Havite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers to give you." Those fathers go all the way back to Abraham and Isaac, which are the first two that he said, "Stand in this place, look as far as you see, this way and this way and this way. This is going to be y'all's land one day." That's who he's talking about. A land flowing with milk and honey. What does that mean? It was abundant. That's just a figure of speech. It's an idiom, if you will. Doesn't mean literally what it says. That you shall observe this rite in this month. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten throughout the 7 days, and nothing leavened shall be seen among you, nor shall any leaven be seen among you in all your borders. And you shall tell your son on that day, saying, "It is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall serve as a sign to you on your hand, and as a reminder on your forehead, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a powerful hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt." I'll also tell you that I think the sign on your hand and on your forehead has some kind of idiomatic meaning as well. There was nothing about keeping the Passover that marked your hand or your forehead, as far as I know. It's just before you. It's visible. It's a visible sign and reminder. "Therefore you shall keep this ordinance at its appointed time from year to year. It shall come about when the Lord brings you to the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall devote to the Lord the first offspring of every womb, the first offspring of every beast that you own. The males belong to the Lord. But every first offspring of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. But if you do not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem." And so everything was to be sacrificed and given to the Lord, except some particular things that were going to be outlined. The name here, the donkey and the human. And those, he says, you redeemed them. And how did he say you redeemed them? At this point, there was a lamb that had to be offered. Now, as you get into the development of the law, and more of it's given later, you'll find out that there's some money involved in some of this redemption process, but that'll come later. "And it shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, 'What is this?' Then you shall say to him, 'With a powerful hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. And it came about when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord the males, the first offspring of every womb, but every firstborn of my sons I redeem. So it shall serve as a sign on your hand." And here we get some ideas about the forehead part of it. and as phylacteries on your forehead. Now notice it says as phylacteries on your forehead. I'm not convinced that the physical phylactery was what he had in mind, but it shall serve as phylacteries on your forehead. For with a powerful hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. What's a phylactery? Just to make sure we all know. It was made out of leather. It was a little thing that you wore around your head. Very often they had a passage of scripture or something contained within it, and it was a reminder. And I think that that's what he's trying to express here, is that this offering of the firstborn of every womb of the land was to be a reminder of what it cost to get them out of Egypt. What did it cost to get them out of Egypt? A lot of dead folks and a lot of dead animals. He did not want them to forget that there was a price paid for their freedom. You know why he didn't want them to forget that? Because he doesn't want us to forget that there is a high price paid for our freedom. What is that price, by the way? Jesus, who is his only begotten Son, the firstborn of Mary's womb. That's part of what made the choice of the carrier of the Messiah a virgin. Beyond the fact that you know that it's an act of God that brought this child into the world, it's also the firstborn. And that gives it the shadow substance relationship with the Passover lamb and the redemption that came about through the shedding of the lamb's blood and all those things. And so there's reasons for this. And think of all of the lambs that were sacrificed every year in remembering this deliverance, this redemption. Year after year after year, every household in the land had to sacrifice a lamb. Every firstborn had to be redeemed to recall and remember what God had done to deliver them. And he said, I want it to be so that when your sons see this and they ask, why do you do this? And you can tell them. You get to tell them the story. And you get to tell them the meaning behind all that you're doing, so that they also know and remember. It came about, verse 17, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near. So there's actually a way to get out of Egypt that was much, much more direct and faster to get away from Egypt. But that's not what God did with them. God did something really odd with them. He moved them away from Egypt, not toward a passage of land where they could freely and clearly get away, but away from Egypt toward some not as easy to navigate land and a big old body of water. That would be an impediment to their departure. God said, let the people change their minds when they see war. And they returned to Egypt. Hence, God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea. And the sons of Israel went up in a martial array from the land of Egypt. What's that mean, a martial array? Yeah, that's right. Outfitted for war. This is like The most frequently that we hear that term is occasionally in emergency circumstances. You'll hear that they declare martial law. And basically that just means they activate the National Guard and they become the law. They were ready to do battle, which ought to have signaled to them what? They might have to fight. They're not going to get away without having to fight. Now, there's a lot of this in the story as well. When you get to the end of this journey with this first generation, they're told they need to go into the land and do what? Fight, which they refuse to do. So then 40 years wandering around in the wilderness, everybody dies, another generation rises up, they get over there, they do enter into the promised land and have to do battle to get their promised land. But there was 2 tribes who saw good pasture land and land that was good for what they did on the other side of the Jordan. And they said, hey, can we just have this land? Instead of going over the Jordan, can we just have this land? And God ultimately said what to them? Okay, yeah, you can have that land, but your men still have to marshal up for battle and go across with your brethren and fight the battles with your brethren, because your brethren shouldn't go to war while you sit at home. And in all this, what we're learning is that even though God's delivering them with a great deliverance, and he wants them to remember the great price that he has paid and the great things that he has done to make their redemption, and he also required them to do what? To work. It wasn't free of obligation on their part. And he didn't send them out the easiest way. He sent them out the way he wanted them to go. There's lessons in all that for us. People sometimes ask, well, wouldn't it be easier if we just did this? That's not the question. Would it be easier? Would it be more effective? Would it be faster? Would it be... What's the question? What did God command to be done? What does he want done? Maybe there's a reason he wants it not to be easy. Maybe there's a reason he wants it to be hard and to take time to come to fruition. So it's not our job to find a better way. It's our job to go the route that God tells us to go. By the way, they start grumbling about going the route that God tells them to go in just a moment. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God shall surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones from here with you. Joseph did not want to stay in Egypt. So they're carrying not only themselves and all the goods that they got from the Egyptians and getting ready to do all the things that they have to do, but what else are they carrying? Joseph's bones. And pretty soon they're going to have to build a bunch of stuff that they then will have to haul around everywhere they go in the wilderness. Tents, tabernacles, boxes, lavers, altars, all sorts of stuff. They set out from Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness, and the Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. If God was moving, they were supposed to be moving. Didn't matter if it was day or night. If that column was moving, the people were moving. If that column was stationary, the people were camped. There's lessons in that as well. I'll also add, when God demanded that they move at night, what else did he provide them? Light to do it by. He's never asked us to do things that he hasn't equipped us to do. We're going to see that in a moment when he starts giving commands about what to be done and what to be built. that he equipped the people to do the very things that he asked them to do, empowering them with skill sets to be able to do it. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. There was this manifestation of the presence of God. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell the sons of Israel to turn back and camp before Baharoth, between Migdal and the sea. You shall camp in front of Baal Zephon, opposite it by the sea. So, okay, he says, all right, go up here, cut through here, get to the sea, and camp. Pharaoh will say of the sons of Israel, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. Now, this is kind of important as well, because to human eyes, what they were doing seemed what? Aimless, pointless. How about foolish? Why are they doing that? Where are they? What are they thinking? That's what he's saying. Is Pharaoh's going to look at their movements and say, they don't know what they're doing. Guess what the world says of those who pursue the things of God? They don't know what they're doing. And you go read 1 Corinthians, and he goes through that whole section about the difference between the natural man and the spiritual man. And the natural man cannot see the things of the Spirit. They're foolishness to him. That's the same thing that's going on here. God is intentionally leading them exactly where he wants them, but it looks aimless to Pharaoh. The wilderness has shut them in, and he's describing the circumstances. Look, they got the sea on one side, and this wilderness land on the other side, this, for all intents and purposes, uninhabitable, not easily traveled territory, and they're stuck. They're just sitting there like fish in a pond. You got a small pond and you stock it with fish. How hard is it to catch a fish? It's not very hard at all. And that's exactly the way he sees this. Thus, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. The way in which he hardened Pharaoh's heart was to bring them out and make them appear to be wandering aimlessly and bring them into a place where they were trapped and easy prey for the Egyptian army. That hardened Pharaoh's heart. He will chase after them, and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. How's he going to be honored by Pharaoh and his army? We don't have the answer in this verse. We just have the statement that it's going to happen. But remember that it says it. And then when we find out what happens to the Pharaoh and his army, then we're going to go, oh. And then remember that the purpose of this, look, it says, I'll be honored through Pharaoh and his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Okay, which it's a perspective shift is really all it is. You're looking at the same thing just from a slightly different perspective. In other words, from the Egyptian perspective, God is going to be seen as greater than Pharaoh. And the way this is setting it forth in this translation is God is going to be honored by Pharaoh, which is the exact same thing in old times. Melchizedek was paid tribute by Abraham, which showed what? That Melchizedek was honored by Abraham. But the how is not explained here. It's going to be displayed for us later. But it's the Egyptian, it's the people that are left in Egypt that are going to see the glory of God. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people, and they said, What is this that we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us? So he made his chariot ready, and he took his people with him, and he took 600 select chariots, and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. I don't know how many the total that ends up being, but the 600 select chariots has reference to the fact that these are, make this modern and American, these are their special forces. The greatest of the fighting force. And then all the rest of them came too. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he chased after the sons of Israel. The sons of Israel were going out boldly, and the Egyptians chased after them with all the horses and chariots of the Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and they overtook them camping by the sea. Well, of course they did, because they're camping. They're not moving anymore. The Egyptians caught up with them. And besides Pi-hahiroth, in front of the Baal-zephon, and Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. And they became very frightened. Why did they become very frightened? Because this big Egyptian army coming after them. But wait a minute. How'd they gotten there? God. And where was God? He's just column that never went away. He was there day and night. They knew he was there. They knew they were where he wanted them to be. This is a walk by faith, not by sight moment. They're walking by sight. They see the Egyptian army, the people that have oppressed them for all these years. That great army. And they become terrified. So the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. They got that part right. They cried to the right person. They said to Moses, is it because there were no graves in Egypt? No. They got the crying to the Lord right. What they cried is another story. Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What? There wasn't anywhere for us to be buried there, so we came out here so there'd be plenty of land to bury us? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Now, the story started with them crying to the Lord and asking what? For deliverance from the Egyptians and their bondage. They have received deliverance from the Egyptians and their bondage, and now they're saying, why'd you bring us out of Egypt? How often do we forget that we're getting what we've asked for? How often do we ask for things and maybe it happens, but it doesn't happen in the way that we imagined it would happen? How might they have imagined they were going to get delivered from Egyptian bondage? We've all seen movies. The great warrior rides in on the white steed and defeats the enemy and leads you out triumphantly, and things are easy and you don't have to do a thing because somebody else does all the work for you. Only problem is that's not the way it worked out for them. They didn't walk out of Egypt to what was perceptibly better circumstances. They walked out of Egypt to the wilderness and to being alone and being required to fend for themselves to some extent. And that wasn't what they wanted, but it was what God gave them. You remember when Jesus teaches the parable of the sower? And he talks about those, you sow the seed on the shallow soil that's over the rock. and it springs up and grows quickly, but in times of testing, it dies because there's no root. Times of testing. See, sometimes the way to salvation involves difficulty and hardship. And we don't want that part. We don't desire the part of salvation that says, get the leaven out of the house. We like the leaven. We want to be saved with the leaven. Why can't I continue to do this that I enjoy doing? This isn't what I wanted. I wanted to be delivered and it not cost me anything. That's what they're saying here. Why have you dealt with us in this way? Why'd you do it like this? That kind of echoes Naaman the leper too, right? Why'd you do it like this? Kind of echoes a lot of people in today's world. What must I do to be saved? Repent and be baptized, every one of you. Why have I got to do that? Why does he want me to do it like that? That's essentially what they're saying. Why has he brought us here to this place into these circumstances? Yes.
First century church. The day of Pentecost, what happened? They couldn't go back home. Then later we see that the early church first faced extreme persecution. And this was Jews who left their old faith to convert to Christianity, to follow Christ, which they was told it was going to be much better, but then it was worse for them until, if you understand what I'm saying, in the first century, all of the problems the church went through, but we see a difference, in my opinion. With Israel, we see them wavering, saying we would have been better to die back in Egypt, but we never see the church giving up. And in a sense of, when you read the book of Acts,
Yeah.
who do we see turning back besides a few individuals? Now we talk about the nation of Israel here.
Right. I'll offer you the 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3.
Yes.
How many of those stood faithful? I'll offer you how many times throughout the New Testament letters it was said, do not grow weary in well-doing. So there were some, and there were even congregations of brethren who grew weary and gave up and looked for shortcuts. And that is not any different than us today. Yes.
Neighbors down the way were farmers. Most of the people there are all Jewish families. My friends were Jews. And what I noticed in the families is you go over there and you got the mom and she starts playing and the dad. And it's like, then it sounds just like what I heard as a kid. They're playing, you know?
Yeah, let me tell you something. Everybody wants to be a farmer until they got to do the work. Everybody wants pretty flower beds till they got to weed them. Now, verse 12 is even more applicable. Is this not the word we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? How quickly they forget. What they're saying to Moses is, wait a minute, we told you. We told you if we followed you that the Egyptians were going to, we told you to just leave us alone and let us serve. In other words, what they're remembering, you know what they're remembering, right? That when he first got there and he first talked to Pharaoh, what did Pharaoh do? He made their work harder. That's when they said, leave us alone. See, they forget completely about the part just a little bit before that when they said what? God, get us out of here. Selective memory is a legitimate and real thing. And it continues to be a legitimate and real thing. When it becomes convenient for me to forget promises that I made, obligations that I made, the fact that I knew something, then I forget it. And what I remember is what makes me look the best. We told you this was going to happen. That's essentially what they're saying. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. You know what the problem is? This is not a dichotomous situation. That's not the only two outcomes. It's just the only two outcomes that they see. What's the third outcome? That they're not taking into account. That they follow the Lord to glory. That God is with them, that God delivers them exactly what he promised, and that they come, he's just rehearsed with them. Right before they walked out, he rehearsed with them, when I give you the land, this is what I want you to do when you get into the land. In order for them to get the land and get into the land, what has to happen? They have to live through this. So, creating this dichotomy that says, well, either we need to be in Egypt serving the Egyptians or we're going to have to die right here, means that they lack faith. They didn't believe what God said when he said, I will give you the land. Yes.
Are these the same people who do not get to go into the promised land?
Yes.
So they never learn.
They never learned. In fact, for 40 years they wandered in the wilderness, recorded in the book of Numbers. For 40 years they wandered around, having the opportunity to learn at any point in time. And they refused to learn, and what happened? They died in the wilderness. Apart from the promise. Yep.
From a start, it makes no sense to deliver people you don't allow to make it to the promised land. But that wasn't the purpose. It was the lineage of these people's children that was the gift of Christ, that was to bear the price. Was God concerned with these people? Yes, but that wasn't his ultimate mission. Because we see he delivered them, then allowed them to all die in the desert. Makes zero sense from a scoffer's viewpoint. But it's their children who lived on, where the Christ eventually came through.
And interestingly enough, that generation that did enter, if you'll remember from when we studied the book of Numbers, right before they crossed the Jordan to start taking the land, they were expressly told, it's not because of you. It's not that you're so good. It was always to create the nation and provide the promised Messiah. That's always what it was about. And they were making it all about them, which is the problem that we continue to create for ourselves to this very day. We make it all about me and what can the church do for me and how does this make my life easier and better and how can I get away from this trouble or that trouble instead of making it about God. Because God is at work to save and deliver us. And if we die along the way while we serve God, he doesn't abandon us. Be ye faithful even unto death, and I will give you a crown of righteousness. It's about God. It's about doing God's will. It's about bringing glory to him. It's about men coming to know Jesus, not us. And if we would learn that, then we would find ourselves in a lot better position and we would stop doing the very things that we're reading about here, which is grumbling and moaning and complaining when things aren't going the way we want them to go. Because we realize it's not about what I want. For it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. The life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. I have to stop. We're out of time. Thanks for your comments and your participation tonight. And if the Lord wills, we will pick up in chapter 14. What is that, verse 13? Next time.
I have heard of a land on a faraway strand. In the Bible, the story